Well, let's get started. I want to welcome everybody to our NAR meeting today. We appreciate everybody participating as well. We especially appreciate our guests today. I wanted to start by introducing our NAR core team. My name is Jake Powell with USU Extension, Jordan Smith at the Institute of Outdoor Recreation and Tourism, Liz Soja, our coordinator for the NAR network and the NAR initiative, as well as Danya Ramori with the University of Utah. So thanks for joining us today. It's exciting to have everybody here today, and we want to especially thank the North Face, the National Science Foundation, USU Extension, the USU Institute of Outdoor Recreation and Tourism, and the Wallace Stegner Center for providing support for all of our efforts. So before we get started, I wanted to take care of some housekeeping items. We really want to know who you are and where you're from. So if you could take just a second, hover over the thumbnail of yourself, and there should be 3 dots that show up. If you could take just a moment and click on those 3 dots and rename yourself. And what we'd like to know is your first and last name, as well as the community, region, or organization you represent. That'll help us to communicate better with you. As well, if you are in gallery mode where you're seeing a lot of different tiles, it's sort of the Brady Bunch effect, we recommend you switch over to speaker mode, so that the people that are talking are front and center, so we can pay attention to the presenters. So with that, I wanted to introduce the NAR initiative. We've used that word a lot. If you heard, it is GNAR. That is an acronym for Gateway and Natural Amenity Region. The idea of that has come from some research that really identified gateway and natural amenity region communities as having unique challenges that are often big city challenges in a rural context. And the more we found out about these communities, the more we realized that they needed really targeted efforts, as well as communication and an opportunity for them to start to work together to address these challenges. So we're doing this in 3 main ways with the NAR initiative: research, education, and capacity building. So this effort that we're spending today, or the time we spend together today, is really supporting that capacity building effort to support and engage these communities. So just to be clear, the NAR initiative was never envisioned, nor is it today focused on COVID-19 alone. It has long been envisioned as a peer-to-peer network where communities are sharing information and resources specific to NAR communities. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has really given us an important opportunity and what we see as a responsibility to assist these communities. And that's why we're here today, is to address some of those challenges. So the way we've been operating thus far is we've been holding listening sessions. In the most previous listening session, participants really highlighted the need or the desire to hear from communities that are doing innovative things. And so many of the participants of that listening session pointed us to communities that they felt were doing innovative things. And our response has been to reach out to those communities to understand what they're doing and then be able to share that with you. So today we have a couple of those communities represented, and we're excited to be able to share their information with you, and we appreciate your feedback and guiding us to linking up with them. So the goal of this session today is to learn from other communities as we all work doing the difficult work of making decisions in the midst of really unprecedented challenges. We're also hoping this becomes an opportunity to connect with other communities, both as audience members as well as to communicate and connect to our presenters. And hopefully we hope that it informs your efforts and your community's efforts moving forward. So on that note, we do plan to host these monthly peer-to-peer learning groups as well. So sort of information in from the audience, and then responding to that with an information out session. So this next session that we have planned in June 23rd, it's a peer-to-peer coaching session. So it's an opportunity for any NAR community to bring and share whatever challenges they may be facing right now, and then receive coaching and support on how they could tackle those challenges from another NAR community. So if you're interested and want to sign up to participate, I will share that link via chat. It is the June 23rd, and there's a Qualtrics survey that you can click on in the chat function that will link you up and put you on our list so that you're RSVP'd for that event. So some quick notes. We will be collecting data today for research purposes. We want to capture this moment in time, and so this meeting will be recorded. And your participation in our meeting today is considered your informed consent. So if you have any concerns about that, please, you can reach out to any of us, myself, Jordan, Liz, or Danya offline and let us know if you have any concerns. We will be following up after the meeting. We have a couple of I think, really exciting opportunities. We have some students at the University of Utah that are going to be doing case studies on our communities as they navigate and their responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you're interested in being part of or being considered for one of those case studies, please reach out to us. We would love to chat with you and link you up with the faculty member in charge. We will also be sharing this presentation, a video link to it, in a subsequent email. So keep an eye out for that if you're interested in you missed something. We also will include you as a list of participants in a follow-up email so you can connect with each other and follow up and hopefully learn from each other. So today we've invited two community leaders of NAR communities to share with us how their community is trying some different innovative approaches to deal with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think one of the things that our research has identified as the exciting efforts of NAR communities to be innovative. They typically can adjust and make new and exciting opportunities for themselves much quicker than, say, an urban community. So we think that's really an exciting opportunity to share and hopefully to replicate in your own community. So we've asked our participants today to participate in sort of an interview style, and I'll be asking them a suite of individual questions. And then during the interview, we encourage you, if you have any thoughts or questions, to post them in the open chat, and we will we'll curate and review those questions and then present them to the presenters at the end of the meeting. So, that's an opportunity for you to hopefully communicate with them and get your questions answered. So I wanted to start off by highlighting a community that's trying something new on a city street scale. So we wanted to welcome Shannon Haynes, the assistant town manager of the town of Breckenridge, Colorado. So Shannon moved to Colorado to enjoy the mountains, and it's pretty hard to beat Breckenridge when it comes to being in a place of majestic mountains. It sits at 9,000 feet above sea level, and like many other NAR communities, it has a history of resource extraction that has evolved into a year-round recreation. Shannon works helping nearly 5,000 year-round residents and countless visitors make Breckenridge not only welcoming, but sustainable and environmentally conscientious. So thanks for joining us today, Shannon, to share with us some of the work Breckenridge is doing to adjust to the challenges brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm going to ask Shannon a couple of questions. I want to start with just providing some context. So Shannon, if you could help us understand how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the Breckenridge community and maybe the larger region, if possible.
For us. So the town brings in about $4.3 million in tax revenue in March, and we took in a little less than half of that. And so that not only is you're talking several $1 million just from the town perspective, but then when you take that down to the impact to businesses, many businesses that are located in ski towns rely on the month of March in particular in order to get them through the year. So they generate a significant amount of revenue in March that carries them through April, May, June, and then to the slower fall months before the ski season starts again. So I think, pretty much everything came to a standstill. One of our largest lodging companies laid off about 800 or furloughed about 800 employees. And you think about that, kind of an exponential scale across the community is a huge number of people who were out of work. That said, the flip side is we hope that because we are tourist driven and people are itching to get out and get away, and we're within really close driving distance to Denver, that we'll probably see maybe not a return to normal, but at least an uptick in our business more than maybe other communities will see. So we may have the opportunity to recover quicker because of our industry and our proximity to Denver.
Yeah, so maybe on the heels of that, as you're planning and looking down the road at people coming back, I think that's maybe where your idea, the innovative aspect of what you're trying to do, and it's really focused on more public space and using public space in different ways. So can you tell us a little bit about where the idea for what you guys are working on, maybe give us some background on that, and when it will be implemented?
Right. So we're creating what we're calling a walkable Main Street. The majority, say 2/3 of our prime Main Street area, we're going to convert to pedestrian only. And we started the conversation around how do we space people out? It's a very historic area. The sidewalks are fairly narrow. How do we get people to socially distance in that kind of space? And so we thought, well, we could do directional travel, but that's hard to manage. We could take away parking and let people kind of spread out into the parking lanes, but allow traffic, but that's not particularly safe. And so as we brainstormed and kind of worked through how we make this happen, we came to this idea of shutting the Main Street down to cars, which has come up many, many times over the past several years. And for a variety of reasons, we've decided not to make our Main Street a permanent walking area. But that's how that all started. And from that idea of spreading people out, we then moved to, this is a great opportunity to allow our businesses to expand into that public space. For those who don't know, in Colorado, our restaurants are able to open either at 50% capacity or 50 people, whichever is less. And so for many of our restaurants, that's really limiting. And we know that we have businesses that are failing or have failed, and that's just one more piece to the puzzle and whether or not they get to succeed. So we decided that in addition to allow a larger space for pedestrians, we could allow these businesses to expand. And ultimately, they're likely to get 40% more seating than they might otherwise have by being able to do this.
So when we talked, you mentioned, I guess there's some logistical or procedural challenges that you've come up against when trying to implement this idea. How did you address those, and how has that worked?
So as I was thinking about this, there were so many logistical hoops to jump through. I don't think we have time to run through them all. But I'll just, talk about a couple of them. We really take our historic district seriously and how that looks and what kind of character and brand Breckenridge demonstrates to the public. And so we wanted to make sure we were still kind of keeping with that. So we're going to make sure our businesses all look the same. So we had our tourism office, who's been an integral part of getting this off the ground, source tables and stanchions. So every business who's going to expand will get those items through the tourism office. We got a great deal. So $350 for the 8 weeks we're planning to have the road closed, and everything will look the same, or at least fairly similar. So that was one piece. How big a space people should get was another factor that we've been around and around on several times over the past couple of weeks. Some of that because we wanted to make sure the space was big enough to socially distance everyone and meet the state requirements for how far the tables had to be spaced. But anyway, it was a lot of, okay, we've settled on something. No, that's not going to work. Let's try something different. Okay, a rectangle doesn't work. Some folks are going to get a different shape. But, kind of jumping through those hoops and figuring out the fine details of what this would look like. One of the more legal factors that came into play was there are folks who have access to their property via Main Street. So when we shut the road, we take away that access. And that's a property right that people are entitled to. So we really had to be flexible and adaptable and willing to work with these different property owners and businesses to find a way to get them access to their property. So we weren't taking away something that they rely on and something they have a right to. A few of the other things, and I'll just quickly list them. I won't run through the details of each, but considering how we get deliveries to businesses when the road is closed, how we get trash off of the street and out of the dumpsters when the road is closed, how we handle potential common eating areas. Colorado is allowing for takeout alcohol, and we have a no open container law. So how are we going to handle that? We made our businesses, or required our businesses, to enter into a license agreement with us in order to use our town property. And then kind of one of the other big pieces is we obviously lose a considerable amount of parking by closing our main street. And in addition to that, great timing, we are building a new parking structure. So in the space where we're building the structure, we're losing 550 parking spaces. So all of those things were challenges.
Yeah, I think it highlights, and I appreciate the boots on the ground view of sort of the multitude of challenges when you come up with an idea like that seems as simple as closing down a road to make more space.
Mm-hmm.
Can you when you use the word we, I'm curious, like who is the we? How did you get your business owners, your city, the road department, and all these moving pieces to mesh? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Sure. It really was a community team effort. So we started with a small group of town staff and BTO, it's our tourism office staff, kind of working through the details. We added in some of our restaurateurs to add perspective. And then we also put together a reopening team, which is a much larger group that involves retail, restaurants, nonprofits, arts, kind of the whole group, the whole gamut of everyone in town that has a stake in how we move forward. So we have kind of two groups, one that's Main Street focused, one that's a broader focus on overall reopening, and then there's crossover between the two. But I'm hopeful that we've included every demographic that has an interest in this that we could think of.
Yeah, thank you. I'm curious, based on this experience you've had with doing something innovative, what's your key advice or maybe nuggets of wisdom, having gone through this and in the near future opening and piloting this idea? What would you want to share with maybe other gateway communities throughout the Intermountain West?
Well, I think back to your previous question, we've had success in the past with bringing our community together and sitting down and having conversations with the people who are most impacted by our decisions and letting them have a seat at the table. So I think pulling together stakeholder groups and hearing what they have to say, and then being flexible and adaptable and open to ideas that we might not normally have thought of, or even to the point where we ask council for the ability for the town manager to issue executive orders during this time of crisis. And we've issued 4 of those so far, but they've all basically been, with the exception of a requirement to wear masks, they've actually loosened our code rules. So we're allowing signage where we hadn't allowed it before. We're allowing retail display of merchandise where we wouldn't normally. So looking at our rules and understanding why we have them, but then saying in this time, in this place, we need to think differently. So being open to new ideas and having a willingness to step back from the norm and give it a chance.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. As I mentioned, hopefully those in the audience have some targeted questions for Shannon that we'll post. If you post them in the group chat, we'll curate them and bring them up to Shannon after I talk to Devin. So thank you, Shannon. I appreciate your willingness to share and your candor. It's awesome to see a group of people, reacting and trying to make the best of a tough situation. So on that same note, our next guest is looking at bringing people together to begin talking about how they're going to build their new normal moving forward in the Lake Tahoe area. So Devin is a person that, from what I know, wears a lot of different hats. By day, he works as the sustainability program manager for the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, and by night, he's a city council member for the city of South Lake Tahoe. So the city of Lake Tahoe, or South Lake Tahoe, is interesting. As you can guess it by its name, it sits on the shores of Lake Tahoe, but it's right on the border of California and Nevada, and sort of shares a sister city in State Line, Nevada. The town has a growing population of about 22,000 and is home to the Heavenly Ski Resort. So Devin, welcome and thank you for joining us to share your insights.
Thanks for having me.
So first of all, I'm hoping I'll ask that same question I asked Shannon. For your community, kind of help us understand how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected your community and perhaps the larger region.
I mean, I'll just go ditto with what you've already heard on that question. I think a lot of us have the same challenges. Unique to Tahoe, I think, and South Lake Tahoe, that you mentioned that state line. So I think that's been one of the more challenging challenges that we've faced specifically, especially with the state line. Last week, our casinos and hotels on the Nevada side were allowed to be open, while all of our hotels and businesses on the California side were still closed. So we literally had on state line a hotel in Nevada with a casino, and then a hotel in California that share a parking lot that straddles the state line, and one was allowed to be open and one wasn't. So the mistiming of those states openings and our, sometimes fortunate and in this case maybe unfortunate location along that state line has provided challenges. But on the flip side, within the Tahoe region, we're just one of many different jurisdictions, including 6 counties and regional governments, actually where my day job is. And that forces us to work together and collaborate. And I think that's also where we've had strength and seen success in our response. And yeah, the South Lake Tahoe, 60% of our economy is tourism based. So you can kind of extrapolate the consequences from there.
Yeah, thanks. So sort of the work that you worked on, and I'll let you explain it, was this idea of a transformational change committee, of bringing people together to not only think short-term, immediate response to the challenges of today, but also how do these challenges affect tomorrow. So if that committee was the response or your solution, can you describe to us what the problem that your community recognized and how you decided to solve it?
Yeah, so a little context to that very buzzwordy committee name. When we were looking at our response back in March and April as a city, and I'm sure Shannon and Breckenridge were doing the same thing and talking about how do you shut down streets or how do you open outdoor space, we saw a need for city council input, and city council members wanted input on how do we do immediate needs, support businesses, get people fed. But I also felt that we didn't want to miss this opportunity by only focusing on getting back to the tourism industry that is now shuttered and has put us in this situation. Like, how can we transform it? How can we use this situation? So we really just went in with hey, let's name it something buzzwordy and give it a good spin and talk about things that aren't just let's bring back tourism. Obviously recognizing tourism is always going to be a major part. And we put out just a simple little interest form to the community to see who wanted to meet with us and just talk about cool ideas. We ended up getting 94 people responding back from our community. So we had a series of listening sessions from these community members on what they were thinking, and going into it, we really didn't have a goal or a problem we were trying to solve. But coming out of it, we really heard some very major themes from people. But one of the biggest ones, and I think in terms of this and changing the new normal, how can we build a bigger base of people that live in our community in order to be able to support our businesses when we don't have tourism? And then also around just, that culture of, what it means to be in the mountains and what it means to be someone that lives in a tourist community, and it doesn't always have to be us versus them, and really a cultural shift, and then a shift away from don't want to say away from the tourism industry, but understanding that, prior to the 2007 recession, we were at 40% tourism, and now we're at 60% tourism. If we go to 80% tourism, the next time something like this comes around, we're going to be in even worse shape.
Yeah, Devin, I think it's interesting, and maybe some of these other NAR communities would agree that some of the underpinning or fabric that has been woven over time sort of has been frayed, or the potential holes in that fabric have been exposed through the COVID pandemic. And it's interesting that not only recognizing that in South Lake Tahoe, but then putting together something to respond to that is I think really interesting.
Yeah, I think it can also be both too. Like, why only build trails for visitors? Like, why not think about building trails for locals? And instead of advertising to come visit Tahoe, why not advertise come live in Tahoe? Just a slight change of your framing can make a big difference.
Yeah. So when we talk about this committee specifically, can you tell us about the process used to set up? You alluded a little bit to it, but is there anything about it that's special or unique in the way that you guys have built this committee?
No, I think by design, I wanted to make it unspecial and ununique. I think our community constantly has a challenge of getting in a room and spending 6 months trying to come up with this beautiful vision statement and what do we want to be. And we do it every 10 years, and there's a stack of old vision documents. So I really wanted it more to just be, hey, if you're interested in giving some input, like, we want some cool, interesting ideas. We got a wide variety of people and a lot of diversity. And it was kind of like, okay, how can we actually set up actions to do it? So it's not like, here's some big vision. It's, okay, in the next year, the city will do this, this, and this, and actually put dollars and cents to it and like assign staff members to implement it. So, I think it's unique because I tried to make it as ununique as possible.
Ununique is wonderful. I'm curious. You do have, in addition to your hat as a city council person, your role in the Tahoe Regional Planning. How is the larger agency addressing maybe even the recreational impacts of COVID-19? And what are some of the things you've learned from those efforts?
Yeah. So again, I mentioned sort of our position in Tahoe on this border. So within the 2 states, we have 5 counties and an incorporated city, and then my agency my day job is the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, and we're a bi-state environmental agency that regulates development in the region to achieve environmental goals. So we've done partnerships and collaboration for a long time in the Tahoe basins. We have those structures already set up, so we were able to mobilize our existing what we call our Sustainable Recreation Working Group, which has been meeting for the last 2 years on the topic of recreation and moving towards a more managed recreation system. I see a bunch of questions popping up in the chat about a car-free basin and all that. Like, we were already, and Shannon alluded to it too, we were already talking about a lot of these ideas. It's just now COVID's maybe providing an opportunity and political cover to do them. So we've formed an incident command team, and we've been doing weekly calls with all the recreation providers around the basin, and really just working on coordinating how we're getting our recreation sites open, and really that sort of government land manager side of things, and making sure that we're safely opening in order for communities to open their businesses and have visitors come. So that's been one thing we're working and really coalescing around messaging. So we've got in the Tahoe Basin, we have a program called Take Care Tahoe, which is our regional stewardship campaign. So we've really mobilized that to be our COVID information page. And actually, I was just looking at the stats on our website. We're driving people to that. We've actually seen through COVID, we've increased our web traffic over 280% from May of last year. So we now have 6 billboards around the region in the urban areas directing people to our website on how to recreate responsibly, how to travel responsibly, especially as we start to open up.
Yeah, I think in maybe I can speak to Utah a little bit, but that opening up and the staging or the coordination of opening up with communities and public lands and recreation providers has created a lot of tensions and challenges as it's happened, in different phases. And I think that's an interesting opportunity where where you had a relationship or a working group that then was able to, I guess, morph a little bit and address that coordinated reopening, so visitors and residents were getting the same information from the same source, and hopefully following that information in a way that helped the region as a whole operate more efficiently. A question for you, I guess this is sort of the good, bad, and the ugly, but what challenges or roadblocks have you encountered as you're trying to coordinate a regional recreation response? How did you overcome those challenges, and what do you feel like others might be able to learn from those experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of the challenges we've experienced are probably what all of the communities have experienced. You know, recreation site parking lots are closed and people are still going to them. So now they're parking on the highway and in the dirt, and safety issues and crowding, staffing of recreation sites, getting those open, those differing rules. But it really does go back to that communication and collaboration and having those channels and those group calls to be able to problem solve. And when you have two land managers that are you know, next to each other, one may have resources that the other doesn't. How can you share those? And for example, one of our calls, there was just this week, you know, Highway Patrol reported an issue that they were having in a certain location, and Forest Service was on the call and said, oh, I didn't even realize that was happening. I'll email the person right now. And we were able to, you know, we were able to solve a lot of the problems and challenges we faced just by the fact that we're talking about them and brainstorming. And then with being able to take higher level issues and elevate those to executives and decision makers. We've been doing weekly memos to the executives within the region, so they're getting updated on a weekly basis on COVID cases, status of recreation sites, land managers, current issues, what we're working on. So we've really been able to create a streamlined decision-making channel to address any of the barriers that we've had. And things are so changing so rapidly. A problem this week is maybe not a problem next week.
Yeah, I don't think truer words haven't ever been spoken. I'm curious, Devin, you know, this committee that you're working with, this group of people that are coordinating, seem to have been working before. For those communities on the call that maybe don't have these kind of relationships already at least incubated, how would you suggest maybe them pulling these people together to do a similar effort?
Yeah, I mean, it really, obviously we have the group in organized already, but it doesn't, I'm sure everyone in their communities knows the people that they need to talk to, and maybe you've just never had them in a room. And technology like this with Zoom offers great capability. When we first started, obviously we had our group, but our group was never all encompassing and didn't include everyone possible. It also was focused just on the Tahoe basin. And for this effort, we actually expanded to the greater region. So we probably doubled the amount of land area and jurisdictions that we normally work with, because we realized that that's what we needed to do. So it was really just about getting on the phone, emailing people, inviting people, setting a meeting time, controlling a Zoom, and starting with that regularity of getting notes out. And people had been hungry for information and wanting to share and wanting to problem solve. So it really, you just need to provide the conduit for people to come together, and they will around this topic.
Yeah, thank you. Last question for you that I want to ask is same as I asked Shannon. What, based on these experiences with the Transformational Change Committee, both as a council person and during your day job, what are, I guess, the key advice or your nuggets of wisdom you want to share with the NAR communities throughout the Intermountain West, or perhaps the ones on this call?
Yeah, I mean, I think since COVID is the topic of the, I guess it's not even the topic of the month now, it's the topic of the season. You know, obviously, I think COVID is going to change a lot of things. More people are going outdoors, more people are enjoying it. But not everything's going to change forever. Things are going to go back to normal. People are going to want to get back to normal. Travel patterns will eventually get there. But, you know, one thing that I think everyone recognizes is it hasn't necessarily caused new problems in the recreation outdoors world. It's really exacerbated existing problems. So those things that you were already working on are still just as relevant today as they were pre-COVID. You know, equity and accessibility to the outdoors is going to continue to be an issue, and again is exacerbated. So I think you know, my key nugget of advice would be, use COVID again, as I said, that political cover to achieve the goals that you were already working on, and figure out how you can use this, tragedy and find some silver linings to advance those projects you were already wanting to advance.
Awesome, thank you. Great advice. So we are going to transition to a Q&A session that is open to anybody in the audience that is interested or willing to pose a question. And I'm going to turn some time over to Liz to pose those questions either to both of our guests as a panel, or if there's one that's specific to an individual or region, we'll focus it on a certain person. But please, Devin or Shannon, if you have insight on any of the questions, please feel free to chime in.
Yeah, so Devin, since you've already sort of noticed it in the chat, one question was, how has the pandemic reinforced discussions related to the Carless Tahoe Basin idea?
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever get to a Carless Tahoe. I think some of the challenges Tahoe has over a lot of places like that you see, like national parks, we have cities in the middle of what should be a national park, and we have interstate highways that you can't shut. They're public roads that people go through. So, but that being said, transportation and getting people out of their cars has always been a goal and a priority. And I think some of the things that the pandemic itself has reinforced within that is our ability to manage capacity at individual sites and manage parking reservations and better move people around in order to avoid crowding at hot spots and things like that. So it's definitely reinforced, again, it's exposed things that we've already known, and that's what it's really reinforced for us.
Awesome. And then this next question, I'll ask to Shannon first. Does Breckenridge have a contingency plan for businesses in case there's another outbreak in fall or winter relating to best practices or pickup accommodations?
I wouldn't say that the town has a plan. I think based on these committees that we've put together, we believe our business people have a solid plan. We've had several conversations with our lodging community, and they're pretty strong leaders, both at a national and international and statewide level, in guiding our government and how they're releasing lodging to open up under their public health orders. So they've come up with really good, solid best practice plans. Both our restaurant and our retail folks embrace the idea of curbside pickup and takeout. So I feel confident if this were to happen again, they could do that. I think what will be key for us is making sure that we've demonstrated both in Breckenridge and in Summit County that we can manage the pandemic so that we don't fully get shut down again, that we can use those best practices to demonstrate to the state that we can manage our population, we can also manage our guests.
Awesome. And then Devin, that same question to you. Has Tahoe thought about a fall or winter outbreak?
I don't know how thorough our plans are. I'm sure it's starting to get on people's minds. And now that we're finally moving just this Friday into having our hotels be allowed to open, we've really just been focusing on that. So I'm sure we'll start transitioning to that. I know our county health department is very much on top of it and has been very active, and we'll see.
And then to follow up with that, there was a question about, is there a relationship between South Lake Tahoe and the small communities on Highway 50 on the other side of Echo Summit? Perhaps were they included when you mentioned that you had doubled the size of the people in the room?
Yeah, we did include the El Dorado National Forest, which is to our west over Echo Summit, but none of those smaller communities are really involved. There's a big east-west divide because of the crest of the Sierra. So we're on the eastern side, we're really isolated on this side of the county.
Devin,
awesome.
to build on that question, sorry, how did you, I guess, draw those regional boundaries? What were some of the constraints or the logic behind, how far do you stretch to bring people in to have these conversations versus kind of cut them out because they don't have an influence?
Totally. Not to say that none of that is important. They don't have an influence. Some of it's just sort of natural, but most of it is really that watershed based. We're on the eastern side of the Sierra. So all of our water actually flows out of the Tahoe Basin into Nevada, into the desert Pyramid Lake. So really through our main highway corridors, 80 in the north and 50 in the east, and then sort of the watershed boundaries kind of defines our loosely defined region.
And then the final question that's been put in the chat is, could both of you say something about any vacation rental issues you've come up with or encountered with regard to distancing, safety of cleaning folks, etc.? Did you run into anything you didn't expect with vacation rentals?
So we opened our short-term rentals on Monday. So it's been, not this Monday, last Monday. So it's been about a week and a half since those opened. There are some issues. Our more professional property management companies and our larger properties obviously have put a lot of thought into time between rentals, how they're doing their cleanings, how long they're letting their rooms sit. And then some of the more, say, mom and pop type establishments maybe aren't following those protocols quite as closely. And again, we have some folks who are really active in lodging associations that are trying to drive more best practice professionalism among all lodging properties. So I think that is a challenge and will continue to be a challenge. One of the unexpected things we ran into is we still have some limitations around gathering size. So in some cases, like in a rec center, we can have 50 people, but in a conference center, they can only have 10. So we have, say one large property in town that does mostly conference business, and they can't do that right now. And so, again, these lodging associations are really working to get the governor to change that public health order to understand what they're capable of doing. So that I think that's going to be an ongoing issue as we work through this and find what's right.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. All of our lodging is allowed to open on the 12th. So we have not been open for the last 3 months for any of our lodging. So I think one thing kind of non-health related throughout this crisis, I think that it has definitely exacerbated local versus second homeowner, local versus visitor tensions that all of our communities have always dealt with. But we definitely early on in the crisis had what could be described as vigilante groups, but basically neighborhood groups would spend every night going around in every second home that they knew on their block. If it had lights on, they would call the police and report them. So we definitely, I think, tensions between our visitors and residents and second homeowners are high right now, and that's never good. So not a directly a cleaning issue, but a more cultural issue that I think this has exacerbated.
Yeah, and we've heard similar things from other communities that have run into this similar to the same issue. Danya has a question, not specifically related to COVID, but maybe connected. Knowing what you now know, what would you have told your communities 10 or 20 years ago in terms of planning, resilience, that may have helped prepare you guys for what's going on?
Buy PPE. I think, again, going back to my recreation example, it's about having the communication structure set up and the relationships and the partnerships to be able to mobilize when things like this come up, whether it's COVID or it's a wildfire or, anything, any sort of emergency. It's not, it doesn't help you respond to the emergency if you have to make your phone tree while the emergency is going on. If you already have that phone tree in place or that email tree in place, you can respond a lot faster. That's not necessarily 10 or 20 years ago. Like you can do that today.
I think I'd love to wait till we're a little bit farther into this to figure out what I would have told someone 10 or 20 years ago. I mean, I think as we look at it right now, if we had a more diversified economy, We're really reliant on sales tax, and a previous council many, many years ago made the decision, a conscious decision, to get away from property tax and go to sales tax. I can't say that was not a good idea, because we may benefit from our model in recovering quicker. So I don't know that that necessarily wasn't right. I think there's a lot that we don't know yet. So before I give any advice, I think I need to know more.
For sure.
I think there's the health aspect to it, but on the economic side, it's still, I don't want to sound insensitive, because there are people dying, and I don't want to lose that. But in certain aspects, it's another depression, and it's another one of those cycles of people lose their jobs. Stock market went down. I don't know what it's doing, but and then people don't travel. Obviously, in those previous situations, you wouldn't go from having visitors to having absolutely zero visitors for 3 months. You still had some visitors, so you could still limp along. But I think it's the same type of planning that you need to do for any recession in a government, and make sure, like you said, have a diversified business, have a diversified tax base, have local people working there, have, things like that. So I don't know, again, that COVID is necessarily something that now we need to, move forward and have a plethora of pandemic plans in place, but more just general, like, what are the issues we already have and how do we need to fix them? It's just COVID has brought those out. There is a good comment there about hospitals and have better planning for hospitals in rural areas.
Yeah, that one just popped out. Jake, I'll let you pick between the final 2 questions in there, and I think that'll wrap up our Q&A time.
Man, that's tough. I think, yeah, let's talk a little bit about hospitals, just because we have maybe 2 ends of the spectrum, and Devin, this sort of, you highlighted the need to coordinate with the local health departments, and every state is sort of doing things a little differently, and giving different levels of responsibility and authority to local health departments. But that is something that is sort of unique in these gateway communities, is a lot of them are set up to handle the broken legs and the injuries that happen skiing and mountain biking, and but they're not necessarily set up for long-term stays. They're usually a place to get somebody stabilized and move them somewhere else. And so it has perhaps highlighted some systemic challenges in the hospital, or the way that we allocate hospital resources in rural communities as well as gateway communities. But if you could talk maybe a little bit about, how was your health system set up, or did it, in the case of Moab in the question, was that a weak spot that sort of has driven the other economic, or the plan for reopening is somewhat, the pinch point is maybe the hospital system that we never even would have considered as an economic or community growth pinch point before. Maybe you could talk to what Breckenridge and South Lake Tahoe are doing. Yeah,
the hospital is definitely a pinch point. I mean, we just don't have beds. We don't have equipment. I mean, it's the same thing as everywhere. I think it was a big concern in the beginning when they weren't ready. Our hospital has been very proactive, and they have been very upfront in what their capabilities are. And I think they're at the point where they feel comfortable that as hotels reopen, that they've been able to, I think, triple their bed base, and feel confident that they'd be able to handle any type of surge. I don't know whether our rural communities, how much of any surge or cases are going to directly impact our local health system. We've seen a relatively low amount of our positive tests actually need to go and have hospitalization, and so I'm holding out hope there. But that's definitely one of those things that again, was all across the state was an issue.
Shannon, Shannon, before you answer that question, I just want to make a plug while people are listening. If you know of any other innovative practices that are happening in gateway communities, please feel free to put those in the chat box, like the community and maybe a contact. We would love to continue to curate and gather this information. So if, just to plant that seed in your mind. Also, if you're interested in being part of a case study that the University of Utah students are going to be working on, please put or at least to be considered, put your name and community in the chat box so we record that. So I just want to create some space for folks to do that while you're answering this question, Shannon.
Sure, and I'll keep it short. I think one of the biggest issues we had was communication, where I think our hospital system was more prepared than the community knew. And so there was a lot of community concern and pushback on whether or not our hospital could actually handle a surge, but they had done a really good job of expanding their capacity. We have urgent cares around the county, and so they had facilitated agreements with other spaces. So if they had to take in and add more beds that they could, they had negative pressure rooms. So they had done a lot of the things that they needed to do, but people didn't know that. And then the only other piece with us that's maybe a little bit different is because of our elevation and a disease like we're experiencing now, people who are very sick aren't going to be able to stay in Summit County. They're going to have to go down to Denver. And so I think we're very lucky that our hospital is connected with a much larger hospital system in the metro, and they made sure that they had the ability to transfer folks if needed.
Wonderful. Yeah, we have just a few more minutes. Like I say, if anybody has any thoughts or is interested in being part of a case study, or like I say, knows of any innovative practices in your community or in other communities, please post them so we're aware of them. But I do want to ask that question from Jay at UDOT. Is there anything that South Lake Tahoe is doing to bolster the ongoing economic redevelopment, remodeling of the Gateway to State Line efforts? And I guess that's targeted at you, Devin. There's about a minute and a half if you want to try to tackle that question.
Yeah, I mean, there's a project that's being developed right now to reroute the highway around our casinos and turn that into a main street with cobblestone and more outside space and all of that. And I don't know how much COVID impacts that, but we are definitely looking at upgrading our gateway. Our community definitely understands that our built environment does not reflect our natural environment, and something we're continually working on improving.
Awesome, thank you. Well, these sessions are meant to be short, intense, and really be the tip of the iceberg and start a conversation. So you now have heard from two great people that are trying to make the best of a rough situation in their communities, and I applaud your efforts, Devin and Shannon, and again, I'm so grateful for you taking some time out of your busy schedules to share your insights with this group. We hope that some of the information you've heard today becomes something you follow up on, that you reconnect with other communities, that you maybe seek some more information. So look for a follow-up email with the recording of this, as well as some contact information for the folks on this call to follow up and make those connections. So Shannon, Devin, thank you so much. Thank you to the NAR team for putting this together, and all of you as audience and guest members and members of the NAR initiative to come be part of this. We really appreciate the effort, and hopefully it was beneficial to you and the communities you serve. So with that, I will wish you all well and have a great afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.